Spider-Man in the MCU has always had a mentor around to help him out, but what if in the next film he gets a new teammate instead? I love solo Spider-Man movies, but I also think the character benefits from having another character to bounce off of. What heroes could Spider-Man team up with in his next movie? Daredevil? Deadpool? Miles Morales? There's a lot of options, so let's discuss right now. I think out of any hero, Spider-Man should team up with Daredevil in a fourth movie. I just think it makes the most sense. Look, after No Way Home, the Spider-Man character has gone through a bit of a reset and has positioned him to be more of the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man rather than a globe-trotting, alien-punching, multiverse-shattering Spider-Man. It really does seem like with the character embracing a standard, tough New York lifestyle while also trading in the stark iron spider suit for something more homemade, it feels like the next movie will be more down-to-earth and street level. That's where Daredevil comes in. Look, Kingpin is out there and we know now that Daredevil is too, so what better way to have Spider-Man in a street level story than by having him team up with the Man Without Fear to fight the Kingpin? This would teach Peter a different type of lesson. In the past, he's faced larger than life bad guys, but what happens when you pit him against someone who rules the criminal underworld? It's something different than what we've seen before. Plus, if he teams up with Daredevil and goes a little grittier, then it would be the perfect time to give Peter his black suits that can be formed from the glob of symbiote Eddie Brock left behind. It feels perfect. Alright, this one probably won't happen for a while in live action, but I just know we all would love to see one of the best bromances in comic history play out on the big screen. Have Spider-Man team up with Deadpool on an adventure. Heck, at this point, don't even make it canon, just have a Spider-Man Deadpool team up movie that has no ties to the larger canon of things, and we'll just say it happened in a random universe. Because come on, this pairing is just too good not to happen. But if you did want to set it in the main universe, then actually that could benefit both characters. What if Peter's in a dark funk thanks to the events of No Way Home and it takes a goofy hero like Deadpool to help cheer him up and make him smile again? On the flip side, maybe Spider-Man could teach Wade Wilson a thing or two about being a genuine hero? See, it's a win-win. These two heroes just bring out a different side of each other. They're both incredibly quippy and love to irritate those around them. So you put them with each other and their mutual chaotic energy feeds off one another and grows into something delightful. Tom Holland's Peter Parker has always been in a mentee role since his debut in the MCU, so what if a future film in the Spidey franchise sees that concept flipped on its head and sees Peter being the mentor for once? Miles Morales is just itching to make his live-action debut in the MCU, and you can tell those films are just chomping at the bits to bring him into the story. There's been a bunch of references to him in the MCU, so it's only a matter of time. The only issue that I see is the Peter and Miles relationship works best when Peter is older and Miles is the teenager. Peter is still in his teens in the MCU, and while having the same age versions of Peter and Miles would be interesting dynamic-wise, I still want to see Peter get a few more years under his belt before taking on his own protege. Well, at least in this instance. You'll see what I mean later. I know Moon Knight is still a pretty new show, but already I can't wait to see what the future holds for this character. He's totally unique and interesting from the heroes we've met so far, and with the character being as popular as he is, I expect him to have a long-lasting impact on the MCU. And I think a team-up between Spider-Man and Moon Knight would be totally random, but that's what makes it so interesting. As I said, Spider-Man is hopefully entering a grittier world of the MCU in future Spider-Man movies, so why not team him up with the guy dealing with a dissociative identity disorder who talks to an ancient Egyptian deity? Really, I know that this team-up is a little bit implausible, but I want it to work as a stepping stone. I really do think Moon Knight is leading to a darker Midnight Suns-esque comic series or event movie or something like that, and that would include darker characters like Ghost Rider, Blade, the Punisher, etc. Having Spider-Man meet and team up with Moon Knight first allows Peter to interact with these awesome characters down the line. Plus, I want to see Peter try to talk with Khonshu and other Egyptian gods because I think that would be hilarious. I think Yelena is one of the best additions in the MCU's Phase 4. She brings a confident, sarcastic energy to all her appearances, and I'm just sitting here impatiently wondering where she's going to show up next. Well, why not team her up with Spider-Man? I mean, you could make that make sense pretty easily. Okay, now that Yelena has had time to sightsee and be the ultimate tourist in the Big Apple, as well as no longer wants to eliminate Hawkeye, she can get back to her mission of freeing brainwashed Black Widows, and I mean, there have to be a few in New York City, right? That could have her recruit Spidey's help. I'm all about team-ups that help both sides grow, and I think this could be a great example of that. Yelena bringing Spider-Man into the world of espionage and Black Widows could open Peter's eyes a bit and make him a bit less naive than he is right now. And then Spider-Man's good-heartedness could be the thing that cements Yelena's desire to be a hero like her sister and eventually join the Avengers. Plus, I just feel Yelena would have plenty of hilarious things to say about Peter's whole attitude. Okay, remember what I just said about wanting Peter to be a bit older before mentoring a hero like Miles Morales? Well, I actually think Peter's age works well with a character like Riri Williams. We know that Ironheart is coming soon, and it's going to be super fascinating to see how the MCU portrays that character. In the comics, Riri Williams is a huge fan of Tony Stark, leading to her first building her own version of the Iron Man suit, to Iron Man eventually mentoring her, to basically Tony Stark's voice and personality being the AI that runs the Ironheart suit. That might be difficult to do now that Tony's gone, but maybe this is where Spider-Man can step up and struggle to be both a good teammate and a new mentor to Ironheart. Peter could struggle with being in the mentor role, and it could provide a new type of challenge for him. We could see the young crime fighter forced to take another young hero under his webbed wing. I just overall like the full circle aspect of Tony Stark training Peter Parker, and then Peter Parker training the girl who will grow into the next Iron Man. Could that happen in Spider-Man 4? Or should that wait until like Spider-Man 5 or 6? Okay, I can't believe I haven't mentioned this possibility yet, because I know a lot of us would want to see Spider-Man team up with the other big Spider-Man again. Seeing Tom Holland, Tobey Maguire, and Andrew Garfield interact with one another was one of the best things the MCU has ever done, and at the risk of ruining a great thing, it would be amazing and spectacular for the three to have another adventure together. Yes, it still counts as a team-up even when it's just a different universe version of yourself. Anyways, what adventure would you like to see these three embark on? Well, in my mind, it would be awesome to see a team-up movie that sees the three Spider-Man forced to jump between all three of their universes and have to face a hodgepodge of villains throughout. We've seen Tobey and Andrew in Tom's universe. Now, what happens when Tom and Andrew have to visit Tobey's universe? That's what I want to find out. Or if you wanted a fun one-off adventure, putting the three Spider-Men in a battle world type of scenario would be the way to up the ante for their second meeting. With the X-Men on their way to the MCU, I keep thinking about which mutant would be best to team up with Spider-Man, and I just always come back to Wolverine. Look, I know I've said in the past that I want Wolverine to take more of a back seat this time around to make room for other mutants to take the spotlight, but on the flip side, teaming Wolverine up with a hero like Spider-Man just has so much potential. I would like to see how Logan's enhanced senses clash with Spider-Man's Spidey sense, as well as how the gruff, no-nonsense, been-around-the-block Canadian mutant interacts with the puppy dog in human form, Peter Parker. Seeing Wolverine team up with Spider-Man might be a way to ease the pain with Hugh Jackman no longer playing the clawed mutant, and it would give whatever new actor who steps into the iconic lamb chops a chance to bounce off of one of the MCU's most popular characters. And like Moon Knight, teaming Spidey up with Wolverine would open the door for Peter to interact with the rest of the mutants once they're introduced. I just want to see how Peter Parker responds to Wolverine calling him bub, don't you? Okay, I think a Spider-Man and Captain America team-up would be delightful. And no, sorry, I don't mean Steve Rogers and Peter Parker. I mean, I guess Peter having to take care of a geriatric Steve Rogers as he plays bingo and eats tapioca would be very silly and very fun to see. I think a better superhero story would be a team-up between Spider-Man and Sam Wilson's Captain America. Already, the foundation is there. Falcon was one of the first heroes Spidey had to fight in the Civil War airport battle, and I want to see those two cross paths again now that Sam has a major suit and shield upgrade. Plus, on a side note, Anthony Mackie and Tom Holland have shown to have wonderful chemistry in interviews, and I bet that would translate to a fun dynamic on the big screen. Plus, a team up with these two would have big implications for later. I imagine Sam is going to be in the position to assemble the Avengers again when another big threat comes to Earth, so having connections with characters like Spider-Man will be important. What type of adventure suits these two? Probably some sort of government mission that brings Sam to New York, and we would see Peter wanting to help out but constantly getting in the way. A lot of these adventures and team-ups have been street-level antics so far, and I know what I said about having Peter be street-level for a bit might be best for the character overall, but let's throw that concept out the window for a second and think cosmic. Honestly, Peter's frantic energy and quippy scrappiness probably would help him fit right in with the Guardians of the Galaxy. Spider-Man in the comics is always involved in the weirdest adventures possible, so what would be weirder than having Spider-Man having to leave Earth behind to help Rocket, Star-Lord, Drax, etc. on a mission somewhere in space? I think that's a fun dynamic, as we haven't really seen an Earthbound perspective on the Guardians yet, and we've mainly just stuck with Peter Quill's outdated pop culture references. Having Peter team up with the Guardians would be an amazing adventure for the character and keep the Guardians closely tied with what's happening on Earth. Who do you think Peter would get along with most? I bet him and Mantis would hit it off, or him and Drax. I like the idea of Peter Quill attempting to be like Iron Man and mentoring Peter Parker by acting all cool, only for him to totally fail. In the comics, Peter Parker has always had a fascinating relationship with the Fantastic Four that I think would translate well in live action. It started off with Peter trying to join the Fantastic Four to earn some money, and his method was to beat them up to show how strong he was. Not a great plan. And of course, he was bummed to find out the Fantastic Four actually don't get money for being crime fighters. Fast forward through the years, and you get the amazing rivalry between Spidey and Human Torch, as well as some instances where Peter did in fact end up joining the team. But I think an MCU team up would do a lot for Peter's character. I think pairing up with a team like this would remind Peter he doesn't have to be alone anymore, and convince him to reunite his makeshift family in MJ and Ned. Although it was teased a bit in Venom Let There Be Carnage, Eddie Brock's transport to the MCU was nothing more than a little gag that may have set up some interesting future Spidey developments, but ultimately robbed us of a chance to see this version of Eddie Brock and Peter Parker interact with each other. Bummer, because I really wanted to see a team up between these two. We all did. Spider-Man and Venom have one of the most interesting relationships in the comics, especially with Venom's gradual turn to a lethal protector rather than a straight-up villain. Seeing these two together would be a treat for all Spider-Man fans, and if Carnage wasn't already used and wasted in Let There Be Carnage, then I would have said that would have been the perfect villain for the two of them to face together. And think of the implications. Spider-Man's eventual interest in photography and journalism could have been sparked by an Eddie Brock team-up, and maybe Spider-Man proves himself to be such a hero that Venom adopts the white spider symbol on his chest, like the comics, bringing the two of them toward their comic-accurate personas. But now, it doesn't look like we'll ever get that, which is a shame. I want to see the two Toms interact with each other. Let Spider-Man dive into the mystical martial arts world of Shang-Chi in the future. I mean, why not at this point, right? Spider-Man fought aliens and vultures and Mysterios and Green Goblins, so why couldn't he get in on the martial arts extravaganza that is Shang-Chi's world? Maybe these two wouldn't star in a movie together, but if there's ever another Avengers movie that brings together Earth's mightiest heroes again, I have a feeling that these two would hit it off rather well. Like, besides Wong, I think Peter would be the first to volunteer for a night out for karaoke, don't you? And there actually is comic precedence for this. In one really cool arc, Peter needs to learn martial arts and Shang-Chi volunteers to help him. This leads to Shang-Chi working with Spider-Man to develop a brand new form of martial arts that adapts to Peter's abilities and movements, and they call it the Way of the Spider. How cool would that be to see? Maybe Peter needs more focus and training in his new street-level mindset, and he asks for Shang-Chi's help to assist him stay calm and develop new skills. Sounds fun. Alright, I'll admit, I really just put Ant-Man on this list because of the humor. I know that's not entirely on how I should form a team-up in these movies, but come on, Scott Lang and Peter Parker are probably the two funniest Earthbound Avengers operating right now, and yet their humor styles are completely different from one another. If these two were forced to go on a mission together with no help from anyone else, how do you think they would accomplish it? Would Peter step up and be a leader? Would Scott's experience lead him to be in charge? Who would be more impressed to meet who? I just think there's a lot of possibilities there. And if a straightforward adventure doesn't work out, then include Peter in another quantum realm adventure. Because at this point, why not, right? How hilarious would it be if after just going through a big multiverse story in No Way Home, Spider-Man is forced to deal with the quantum realm in the Ant-Man series? He'd really be reaching all the corners of the MCU this way. But in the end, this is about a team up, and I just think Ant-Man and Spider-Man's abilities complement each other pretty well. There's a really great comic moment where Spider-Man shares a hot dog with Loki of all people, and it's glorious. Again, I wanted to end this list by highlighting that Spider-Man interacts with everyone, from Howard the Duck to the One Above All to the Watcher, everyone. And that's why pairing him with Loki wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility, especially because Loki's more or less a good guy now. Really, a team-up makes sense. Loki is all about the multiverse right now, and Spider-Man is the hero with some of the most multiversy experience, so I could see Loki coming to Spider-Man for help. Or here's a quick scenario. They introduce the concept of spider totems in the MCU, and we see Kang go through a phase where he wants to eliminate or collect all the spider totems, which includes Peter Parker, and Loki has to team up with the webhead to help stop it. Boom. Make that Loki season 2 if possible, or something more basic would be that both Spider-Man and Loki could be on the new Avengers together, which I still think is a thing that could happen to Loki now that he's a good guy. These are all heroes, but would you want to see Spider-Man team up with a villain in the future? I mean, Spidey has an excellent rogues gallery, right? I just kind of want to see him team up with his version of Doc Ock and play out a superior Spider-Man storyline. That could work, right? What do you think? Let me know in the comments.